Welcome. This is Soothing Whispers ASMR. As always, if there are any sounds or words you would like to hear me perform, please leave them below in the comments. Swan. Elevator. Third. And no, I'm not just saying random words. Tonight we're going to read the third and final section of Aimee Bender's The Third Elevator. It is a delightful fairy tale intended for adults. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the conclusion to this marvelous little tale. Come morning, outside the lobby, the bluebird tapped her beak against the glass. Our egg opened, she cried out. The swan woke up, chilled from the fog, and pressed his beak against the glass, where it made a triangular smear mark. His eyes were bright and shining, desperate. Is it alive? He asked. She nodded vigorously. Very, she said through the glass. It's a lake, a big, deep blue one. I floated around on it all evening, waiting for you. You should have seen it pour straight out of the shell for minutes and minutes and minutes. So much water in that one little shell, and then it knew just what to do, how to settle itself. She glimpsed past her husband's great wings. What are you doing holding our firstborn hostage like that? She said. We had a lake, he said. She laughed. Her wing feathers were damp. Let the poor cloud out, she said. Poor thing has been cooped up all night. How I love a good cool fog. She hopped over to the lobby door and with some difficulty opened it herself. Within seconds, the fog swooshed out into the air, wrapping around the trunks of trees like cotton, exiting grandly. The swan felt his heart contract, then expand, palpitate, then release, and with his head and neck a question mark, he left the sleeping miner and the sleeping logger and went to where the nest was. Sure enough, right by the bundle of indented twigs, there was now a small lake with a pretty shore and all sorts of bugs treading the surface. A graceful sapling grew by the side. There was a hint of dampness in the air. The swan stood close to his wife, white feathers melding with her blue ones into a makeshift sky of their own. Welcome to our family, the swan said meekly. Water lapped over his feet. Calm, relax, calm. After an hour, the logger and the miner woke up in the lobby, doors wide open, swan gone, the sunlight bright and shining and hot. The fog cleared. The miner squinted. The feather elevator was back down, its doors open also. He went right inside. The doors began closing, but he put his foot in the crucial area that stops the close of every elevator and called to the just waking logger to join him. The logger shook his head. The miner just smiled. "You have something better to do?" he asked. So the logger, bleary from a night of bad dreams, stepped forward, and the two men stood in the elevator. To the miner's purest joy, the doors closed, and the elevator rose high, higher, highest, up those 45 stories. The logger wiped his eyes clean of sleep and said, "I don't know what." And the miner said, "This." As if they had heard, the feather elevator doors opened. It was a bright, warm spring morning, and far below they could see the new sparkling lake that the white swan and the blue bluebird swam upon. The feather spread out in a green blanket. The castle glittered in the distance like a wedding cake. "Everything I need," said the miner, sweeping his hand out. The logger's heart was failing. He took a deep breath and looked down. The miner was saying something about the approaching rise of the sun. The logger didn't listen and flung himself out the door of the elevator into the air. The fall was fast and cold, with blur and clarity both, everything a sheet downward, while he saw in detail the flying birds, the tree tops, then the red roofs of the houses, then doors, then roots, and he fell like a stone and was certain to die if something of a wind hadn't held and pushed him enough to the right, landing him in the middle of the small newborn lake that was occupied by one swan, one bluebird, and 1,000 spinning insects. He fell and struck through, and the water was like glass, but still it broke beneath him, and then he did not have to break. Logger. Miner. The miner watched with horror up in his elevator, side by side, gone in a slim fall. He saw the water crash up around the logger's weight. Then the swan and bluebird pull the logger from the water, cover him with leaves, and put cloaks of feathers over his brittle body. The bluebird brought him leaf after leaf until he was blanketed. The lake resettled agreeably and returned to mirror. The swan smoothed the logger's forehead, which was heavy with pain, and found the logger to be so agitated that he went to see his old friend, the queen. The queen was terribly glad to see her old friend the swan, and they sat in the palace garden while ladybugs flew off the bushes and landed on their faces and backs. "He has nothing to do," said the swan, eating a ladybug. "He feels he has no purpose." The queen took a sip of her turtle tea. "Perhaps," she said, "I can find a job for him," she said. "I'll look into it. And how is your firstborn?" The swan hung his head. "I may have chased him off for good," he said. The queen patted the swan's noble skull under those smooth white feathers. She offered her friend a mug of hedge tea. The swan stuck his black beak inside the narrow mouth of the porcelain and drank down the strange, dark liquid herbs. The bluebird called the logger her third child, delivered from the air, from that feather egg cracking open in the sky. I always wanted 3, she told him, nodding. I want my axe, the logger said, curled up on the ground. The bluebird blinked and brushed his cheek gently with the tip of her wing. Bluebird. Swan. Calm. There was now a search party for the missing miner. A couple of men with bags under their eyes and a pasty look were snooping around the lobby looking for him. He's up there, said the swan, on the way back from his visit with the queen. He pointed with his wing. Where? They said, and the swan pointed again to the small gray box in the sky that was the feather elevator. Well, we need him downstairs, shouted the men. No one's as good a worker as he is. I won't come down, yelled the miner from 45 stories up. I will never go back in that line. It's your job, called the miners. We need you. Productivity has plummeted. Never, shouted the miner from 45 stories up. The elevator stood firm in its post above the trees. It's an order, mumbled the miners. Neither one of them was really breathing in the air or noticing the trees, but one did have a shovel and began chopping at the pole that held up that feather elevator. The shovel was not a sharp blade, but he kept hacking away because he was a miner after all, and used to repetitive movement. 10 minutes away, sitting on the edge of the lake, the sound of chipping metal pricked up the logger's ears. He stumbled to the lobby and found the 2 miners crouched at the feather elevator pole, chopping away. You can't do that, he murmured. You have to leave him there. He's found his calling in the world, air. His calling is air. His voice was meek and tentative, and his legs wobbly, still from the fall. The other miners ignored him as he stood there in the lobby, quivering, watching these 2 men as they chopped with hideous form, he had to admit, making ineffective dents in the pole. And while he was standing there, right on time, the 2 other elevators opened and released their goods at the exact same moment. He himself had never seen that before. The metal and timber collectors hadn't arrived yet, and there he was, standing among the 2 piles. Metal and wood were 2 ingredients necessary to make the one thing he needed most in the world. He stooped down at the elevator doors and slowly, with a heavy feeling in his chest, picked up 4 nuggets of gold and a nice hard oak log. He left the chipping miner jerks and ran with the gold and wood over to the workshop where loggers made their tools. There he spent the whole day, working as fast and neatly as he could, his hand muscles remembering the lessons he had learned as a young boy, fingers flying over the sanding machine, the metal cutter, the blowtorch, the saw, making the best alloy of gold and steel, the best handle of oak and elm, sweating until he built a brand new axe, glowing with a golden blade, the handle as smooth as a pebble on the beach. The sun was about to set, and he hoisted it over his shoulder and marched back to the men chopping at the feather elevator. "Stop," he said loudly. By now the miners had eaten away at about a fourth of the pole with messy, choppy bites from the shovel. It was starting to affect the balance, and the pole swayed just the slightest bit in the breeze. They eyed the glittering axe in the logger's hands. He looked exactly right, holding it. "Or what?" they said nervously. "Or I'll chop off your heads," said the logger. And he meant it. He didn't really want to chop off any heads, or, well, he kind of did, but he kind of didn't, and mostly he wanted to make sure that the adventurous miner would stay put in the sky for as long as he damn well pleased. The other miners put their shovels down. "But we need him in the mines," they whined. "Too bad," said the logger, and the two men stood there for a moment, deciding, and then slunk back down with the gold elevator, shoulders low. The logger was so excited to have an axe again, he went around town and chopped down a mess of stuff, including someone's birdhouse and another person's lamp post. The new blade was even better than his last. This one was so sharp from the steel, and also so beautiful in the various lights of day. Honey gold at sunset, brassy gold at noon, lemon gold at dawn. When he came home that evening, he found the miner shimmying down the elevator pole. "I got hungry," the miner said, once on the ground, gingerly touching the raw insides of his arms. "They want you back," said the logger. The miner shook his head and walked over to the lake, where he found the swan and the bluebird tucked into each other, floating. "I'm leaving," he said, bowing slightly. "I want to thank you all very much for your tremendous friendship and kindness." The bluebird and the swan swam to the shore, and the miner walked over and gave each a hug. The sweet chirping bluebird, the warm, soft feathers of the swan, the stalwart, tall logger. Everyone's eyes misted for a moment. Then the miner took off down the lane, a lift in his step, whistling melodic melodies, humming in minor keys. Easy, relax. Word got out about the man with the axe made of strong gold, and after a day or so the king and queen asked the logger if he would please finish the job and chop down that feather elevator, as it had not come down since the other miners had bit at its core and was now a problem with air traffic control. Now that the miner was gone, the logger set to it, and his shoulders and wrists were in bliss immediately. The act of chopping made him feel so right, and the elevator creaked, and he knew just the angle to make a quiet fall, a slow timber over a period of minutes. He ate at that metal pole until it began to creak and sway, and at last dipped down, elegant, lying on the ground like a felled column of smoke. Then he removed the feather box from its pole and brought it to the castle, a room of feathers to sit in for those who needed a little special peace and quiet. The queen liked to sit in the feather box very much, for it reminded him of the friend she missed, who smelled exactly like it. The other two elevators kept operating on schedule with an empty space where the third had been. Some bird set up a nest in there. The logger was appointed Earl of Down. In the evenings, after he'd done his duty chopping down items for the palace, the logger walked to the lake, swinging his gold axe over his shoulder, and spent time with the swan and the bluebird. A few weeks or so after the cutting down of the third elevator, the three friends sat around by the lake shore, watching the spinning bugs make the smallest circles, missing the miner. It was almost twilight, and the air grew moist with night. I bet he went to the ocean, said the swan. He said he wanted to see something big. The logger nodded. He liked to think of that miner walking and whistling and breathing the air. He took a leaf off the ground and began polishing the gold blade of his axe until it nearly bent under the warmth in his hands. The swan smoothed down the feathers in his wings. The bluebird preened herself by the shores of the lake. "Oh, look, look," she said, whispering into the water. "Isn't this lovely? Here's your brother now." And from the west, like a long, slow breath, the fog was rolling in. And with that ends the tale of the third elevator. The lake is calm and the fog is rolling in, just rolling in on the breeze. I hope you enjoyed Aimee Bender's The Third Elevator. With this, I'm sorry to say, our video has come to its end. As always, I wish you a wonderful day and a wonderful night. Sweet dreams.